The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Westfield Academy, but something felt different in the air. The security cameras mounted along the administrative building flickered intermittently, their red recording lights blinking erratically before going dark entirely. Students hurried past without noticing, but in a group chat somewhere, a message appeared. Phoenix Initiative, Day 1 begins now. 3 fire emojis followed, then the message vanished into digital oblivion. Isabella Martinez sat alone in the corner of the bustling dining hall, her lunch arranged with mathematical precision before her. A sandwich cut into perfect triangles, a bottle of sparkling water positioned at a 90-degree angle to her napkin, and a weathered copy of Advanced Combat Psychology resting against her backpack. The book's worn cover drew curious glances from passing students, their expressions shifting from mild interest to bewildered confusion. A 17-year-old reading about psychological warfare didn't fit their usual stereotypes. Isabella appeared unaware of their stares, methodically eating while her dark eyes scanned the dense text. Her appearance suggested vulnerability, long black hair braided down her back, warm brown eyes behind stylish frames, dressed simply in dark wash jeans and a cream-colored sweater that emphasized her petite frame. To casual observers, she embodied everything they expected from a shy academic newcomer trying to navigate her first week at a prestigious institution. Yet subtle details told a different story. The way she sat with perfect posture, spine straight and shoulders squared. How her gaze occasionally swept the room in precise arcs, cataloguing every entrance, exit, and potential threat. The controlled economy of her movements as she turned each page, never wasting motion or energy. These were habits forged through years of discipline, carefully concealed beneath a carefully constructed facade. 3 tables away, Camden Pierce commanded attention without effort. At 18, he possessed the effortless confidence that came from never questioning his place in any social hierarchy. Standing 6 feet 2 inches with the lean build of a lacrosse champion, his perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothing announced his status to anyone within visual range. His varsity jacket hung casually over his chairback, and his blue eyes held the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced genuine resistance. "Notice our newest addition over there." Camden nodded toward Isabella's isolated table while maintaining his trademark smirk. 4 days, and she hasn't spoken to a single person unless directly questioned by faculty. His companion, Oliver Chen, followed his gaze with growing unease. Perhaps she's simply adjusting. New environments can be overwhelming. Adjusting. Camden's laugh carried a sharp edge that made nearby conversations pause. This is Westfield Academy, not a therapy retreat. You either belong here or you don't. He stood with fluid grace, his movement immediately drawing attention from surrounding tables. Besides, Victoria keeps looking in that direction. I can't have my former girlfriend thinking some random bookworm is more fascinating than our conversations. The mention of Victoria Blackwood brought knowing glances from his friends. Everyone remembered their spectacular breakup 3 months prior and how Victoria had maintained careful distance since then. If she was showing interest in the new student, that represented a direct challenge to Camden's carefully maintained image. "Leave her be," suggested Marcus Torres, the 3rd member of their group. "She's not bothering anyone." Camden's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. That's precisely the problem. She sits there every day, ignoring everyone, reading her bizarre books like she's superior to the rest of us. He adjusted his jacket with deliberate casualness. Someone needs to properly welcome her to Westfield. Across the dining hall, Zoe Kim sat with her laptop and smartphone, ostensibly working on assignments, but actually monitoring the social dynamics unfolding around her. As the unofficial chronicler of academy drama, she possessed an instinct for recognizing when situations approached dangerous territory. The way Camden kept glancing toward the new girl while his voice grew progressively louder told her something significant was brewing. She discreetly activated her phone's camera application, positioning it to capture both Camden's table and the corner where Isabella sat in solitude. Years of documenting school events had taught her to always remain prepared. The most important moments often happened without warning. Isabella continued reading, but her peripheral vision tracked Camden's movements with practiced awareness. She noticed when he stood, when his voice changed tone, when his friends leaned closer in anticipation. These were patterns she had learned to recognize long before arriving at Westfield Academy. Her father had spent 12 years teaching her that situational awareness could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. The apple slice in her hand paused halfway to her mouth as she sensed the shift in the room's energy. Conversations didn't cease, but they evolved. Students began positioning themselves to observe whatever might unfold next. The dining hall's delicate ecosystem was responding to a predator in motion. Camden approached with the confident stride of someone who had never questioned his right to occupy any space he chose. His friends followed at a calculated distance, close enough to provide support, but far enough to maintain plausible deniability. The formation was practiced, refined through countless similar encounters over the years. "Greetings, new girl," Camden's voice carried across the immediate area, drawing increased attention. "I'm Camden Pierce, student council president, lacrosse team captain. Practically everyone here knows my name." Isabella looked up from her book, her expression carefully neutral. "Congratulations," she said simply, then returned to reading. The dismissal was so swift and complete that several nearby students actually gasped audibly. In the rigid social hierarchy of Westfield Academy, nobody ignored Camden Pierce. His confident smile faltered momentarily before reasserting itself with increased intensity. "I don't think you understand how things operate here," he continued, his tone remaining friendly, but with an underlying current of steel. "When someone introduces themselves, proper etiquette requires reciprocation, basic social skills." "I understand perfectly," Isabella replied, closing the book and marking her place with a precise finger. When she looked up this time, her dark eyes held his gaze with unwavering steadiness. "I'm simply not interested in participating." The words landed like a gauntlet thrown down in the middle of the dining hall. Oliver and Marcus exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing the dangerous shift in Camden's energy. They had witnessed this pattern before, the initial approach, the polite rejection, and then the gradual escalation, until someone inevitably got hurt. "Not interested?" Camden's laugh echoed across nearby tables. "That's fascinating. You sit here alone every day reading your little war books and you think you're too sophisticated for the rest of us?" He reached out and tapped the cover of her book with his index finger. "What is this anyway?" "Advanced combat psychology. Are you planning to join the military or something? Girls don't usually gravitate toward the whole warfare thing." Isabella's hand moved almost imperceptibly, positioning itself between the book and his finger. "Actually, I find military psychology fascinating. The strategies, the behavioral analysis under pressure, the way people reveal their authentic nature during conflict." Her voice remained perfectly calm, but there was something in her tone that made several students lean closer. "It's remarkable how much you can learn about someone from observing how they choose their battles." The implicit challenge wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Camden's friends shifted uncomfortably, sensing the conversation moving into dangerous territory, but Camden himself seemed energized by the resistance, his pupils dilating slightly with predatory interest. "Is that what you think this is? A battle?" He pulled out the chair across from her without invitation and sat down uninvited. "Because if you want to discuss psychology and strategy, We should probably analyze your current tactical position. New school, zero friends, sitting alone reading about wars that ended decades ago. Doesn't sound like a winning strategy to me. Isabella closed the book completely and set it aside with deliberate care. For the first time since the conversation began, she gave Camden her complete attention. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture shifted slightly, shoulders squaring with military precision. Her hands rested flat on the table, fingers spread for optimal balance and reaction time. To most observers, she still appeared to be a quiet student having a casual conversation, but something fundamental had changed in the way she held herself. "You're correct about one thing," she said quietly. "I am new here, which means I haven't learned all the unwritten rules yet. Like apparently, sitting alone and reading is considered a social offense serious enough to warrant intervention from the student council president." Several students nearby chuckled at the observation, recognizing the surgical precision of the response. Camden's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the first crack in his carefully maintained composure. "I'm simply trying to be welcoming," he said, but his voice had lost some of its casual warmth. "Help you understand how things work. But if you want to continue sitting here like some kind of antisocial outcast, that's your choice." "Thank you for your concern," Isabella replied with mock sincerity, "but I think I'll manage perfectly well." She reached for her book again, clearly intending to resume reading. The dismissal was clean and final, or would have been if Camden were the type to accept rejection gracefully. Instead, he leaned forward, his presence becoming more aggressive and invasive. "You know what I think." His voice dropped lower, forcing people to strain to hear. "I think you're scared. All this tough talk about military strategy and choosing battles, but you're just another frightened new kid hiding behind a book." The words were carefully chosen for maximum psychological impact. In the brutal social ecosystem of elite private education, being labeled scared was often worse than being labeled weird or different. Isabella's fingers tightened slightly on the book's edges, the first sign of genuine emotional reaction. "Fear can be useful," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It keeps people alert, helps them recognize genuine threats." Her eyes met his directly with unflinching intensity. "But it shouldn't be confused with tactical caution. Sometimes the most intelligent strategy is to observe and analyze before making your move." The exchange had attracted a small crowd now. Students at nearby tables had abandoned any pretense of eating or studying, their attention completely focused on the unfolding confrontation. Even the dining hall staff had begun to take notice, though none had intervened yet. There was an electric tension in the air that precedes storms, when everyone can sense something significant is about to happen, but nobody knows what form it will take. Camden glanced around, acutely aware of his growing audience. In his mind, this should have been simple and straightforward. Approach the new girl, establish dominance, reinforce his position in the social hierarchy. Instead, he found himself engaged in a battle of wits with someone who refused to follow the expected script, someone who seemed genuinely unimpressed by his status and reputation. "Observing and analyzing," he repeated mockingly. "Sounds incredibly passive to me. But then again, maybe that's your thing? Maybe you prefer to stay on the sidelines while other people actually live their lives." He gestured broadly around the dining hall. "See all these people? They're not hiding behind books. They're living actively, making connections, actually participating in the world around them. But you—" He trailed off deliberately, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Isabella's response came so quietly that those nearby had to lean in to hear it properly. "I've found that people who need to announce their importance usually aren't as important as they think they are." The sentence landed like a precision missile strike. Several students actually inhaled sharply, recognizing the brutal efficiency of the comeback. Camden's face flushed slightly, his carefully maintained composure cracking for the first time in the encounter. "Excuse me?" His voice had lost all pretense of friendliness now, revealing something uglier underneath. "You heard me?" Isabella said, standing slowly with controlled, deliberate movement. At 5 feet 4 inches, she was considerably shorter than Camden, but something about the way she carried herself made the height difference seem completely irrelevant. "I've been here 4 days, and I've already observed that you feel compelled to introduce yourself by listing your accomplishments. That tells me everything I need to know about your actual level of confidence." The dining hall had gone noticeably quieter now. This wasn't the usual dynamic of a popular student putting a newcomer in their designated place. This was something entirely different, and everyone present could feel the dangerous energy building. Camden stood as well, using his height advantage aggressively. "You have absolutely no idea who you're talking to," he said, his voice carrying a barely concealed threat. "My father is the district attorney of this county. My family has been pillars of this community for 4 generations. You're just some random girl who appeared here last week, and you think that gives you the right to disrespect me? And you think that matters to me?" Isabella's voice remained perfectly steady, unaffected by his intimidation tactics. "You think your father's career or your family's history gives you the right to harass students who don't want to engage with you?" The word harass seemed to hit Camden like a physical blow. Several students nodded in agreement, recognizing the accurate description of what they had been witnessing. The careful facade of friendly welcoming had been stripped away, revealing the ugly reality underneath. "I have the right to talk to anyone I want in this dining hall," Camden said, his voice rising slightly. "And right now, I'm choosing to have a conversation with you." "And right now, I'm choosing to be left alone," Isabella replied with finality. She sat back down and reopened her book with decisive authority. The message was crystal clear. This conversation was over, at least from her perspective, but Camden wasn't prepared to let it end on her terms. The audience, the challenge to his authority, the complete failure of his usual intimidation tactics, it all combined to push him past the point of rational decision-making. "You know what?" He leaned down, placing both hands flat on her table with enough force to make the water bottle jump. "Maybe you need a practical lesson in how things actually work around here." The threat in his voice was unmistakable now, no longer hidden behind fake civility. Several students began pulling out their phones, sensing that whatever happened next would be worth recording for posterity. Zoe adjusted her position to get optimal angles, her finger hovering over the record button. Isabella looked up from her book one final time. When she spoke, her voice carried a quality that hadn't been there before. It was still quiet, still controlled, but there was steel beneath the calm surface that made everyone within earshot pay attention. "And maybe you need to learn that not everyone is impressed by empty threats from insecure teenagers who use their family connections to compensate for their lack of actual personality." The words hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored or backed down from. Camden's face darkened visibly, his hands gripping the edge of the table hard enough to make his knuckles turn white. The careful facade of casual authority had completely crumbled, leaving something much uglier and more desperate in its place. "You want to see what happens to people who don't show proper respect around here?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous, with barely contained rage. Before Isabella could respond, he swept his arm across the table with violent force, sending her sandwich container flying. The plastic hit the floor with a sharp crack, spilling its contents across the polished linoleum. The water bottle followed, rolling under a nearby table with a hollow sound that echoed through the suddenly silent dining hall. The room erupted in gasps and exclamations of shock. This was the moment everyone had been anticipating, the escalation from verbal sparring to actual physical aggression that transformed a war of words into something with real consequences and lasting implications. Isabella stared down at her scattered lunch for a long, measured moment. When she looked back up, something fundamental had changed in her expression. The careful mask of shy new student had finally slipped away entirely, revealing something far more dangerous underneath. She stood with fluid grace, her movements suddenly carrying an unmistakable sense of controlled power and lethal precision. "Pick it up," she said quietly. Camden laughed, but there was a note of uncertainty creeping in now. "What did you just say to me?" "I said pick it up." Her voice was still quiet, but it cut through the dining hall noise like a blade through silk. "You made the mess. Clean it up." The demand was so unexpected, so completely contrary to the power dynamic everyone expected, that the entire room seemed to hold its collective breath. Nobody talked to Camden Pierce that way. Nobody, especially not someone who had been at the academy for less than a week. "Are you completely out of your mind?" Camden's voice rose, drawing attention from across the entire dining hall now. "Do you have any idea what you're asking me to do?" "I'm not asking," Isabella replied with deadly calm. "I'm telling you. Pick up what you knocked over, apologize for your behavior and walk away. This doesn't have to escalate any further." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. For just a moment, it seemed like Camden might actually consider taking it. His friends were watching nervously, clearly hoping he would accept the graceful exit she was providing. The smart play would be to swallow his pride, clean up the mess, and retreat to fight another day. But the audience changed everything. With dozens of students watching, with phones recording, with his reputation and social standing on the line, backing down wasn't an option he could psychologically accept. "You know what your problem is?" He took a step closer, deliberately invading her personal space. "Nobody ever taught you to know your place in the social order. But don't worry about that. I'm about to provide you with a comprehensive education." He reached out with his right hand, intending to push her backward, to reassert his physical dominance through intimidation and force. It was a move he had used successfully before, always effective in putting smaller students back in their designated place in the hierarchy. But as his hand moved toward her shoulder, Isabella's training activated with devastating efficiency. Her response was so fast that most observers missed the crucial details. In one fluid motion, she caught his wrist with her left hand, stepped slightly to the side, and used his own forward momentum to guide him past her. Her right hand found the back of his shoulder, and suddenly Camden Pierce, star athlete and social king of Westfield Academy, found himself face down on the dining hall table, with his arm twisted behind his back in a perfect restraint hold. The entire sequence took perhaps 3 seconds from start to finish. The sound of his body hitting the table echoed through the suddenly silent dining hall like a thunderclap, reverberating off the walls and ceiling. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, the entire dining hall existed in perfect, absolute silence. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their usual clatter of dishes and food preparation. Every eye in the room focused on the impossible sight: Camden Pierce, untouchable golden boy of Westfield Academy, pinned motionless against a lunch table by someone half his size and weight. Isabella maintained the hold with clinical precision, her grip firm enough to prevent movement, but not excessive enough to cause unnecessary harm. "Are you ready to pick up what you knocked over now?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. Camden struggled against the restraint, his face flushing red with humiliation and impotent rage. "Get off me! Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I know exactly what I've done," Isabella replied with calm authority. I've stopped you from putting your hands on someone without permission. The question is whether you've learned anything from the experience. The first phone camera flashes began going off like tiny fireworks around the room. Within seconds, dozens of students were recording from multiple angles, their devices capturing every detail of the unprecedented scene. Zoe's professional instincts kicked into high gear as she positioned herself for the clearest possible shot, her phone steady despite her racing heartbeat. Oliver and Marcus finally broke from their shocked paralysis, moving toward their friend with uncertain steps. "Hey, let him go," Oliver demanded, though his voice lacked any real conviction. "This has gone far enough." Isabella's eyes flicked toward them without loosening her grip on Camden. "It went far enough when he decided to put his hands on me," she said calmly. "But since you're his friends, you can help him make the right choice here. Convince him to apologize and clean up his mess, and this ends immediately." Marcus looked between Camden's twisted position and Isabella's unnaturally calm expression. "Camden, just say you're sorry. This is getting completely out of hand." "I'm not apologizing to her." Camden's voice cracked with fury and wounded pride. "She assaulted me in front of everyone. My father will have her expelled, arrested, completely destroyed." The threats poured out in a torrent of rage and damaged ego, each word captured by multiple recording devices for posterity. Isabella's expression didn't change, but several students exchanged meaningful glances. They were witnessing something unprecedented. Camden's mask slipping completely, revealing his true nature when his carefully constructed image crumbled under pressure. "Your father," Isabella repeated thoughtfully. "The district attorney." "Right." She adjusted her grip slightly, and Camden winced with discomfort. "And you think his position means you can do whatever you want to, whoever you want without consequences?" The deliberate diminishment of his threatened authority landed like a precision strike. Several students actually snickered, recognizing the calculated disrespect for what it was. Camden's struggles became more violent, but the restraint hold was too expertly executed for him to break free through brute force alone. "That's quite enough." The voice cut through the tension like a knife, carrying the unmistakable authority of an adult accustomed to immediate obedience. Dr. Harrison pushed through the crowd of students, his expression grim but unsurprised. At 6 feet 5 inches with the broad shoulders of a former college football player, he commanded instant attention and respect. His weathered face showed no shock at the scene before him, only the weary recognition of someone who had witnessed too many variations of the same destructive pattern. "Ms. Martinez, please release him," he said, his tone respectful but firm. "Mr. Pierce, you will remain exactly where you are until I give you permission to move." Isabella studied his face for a moment, then nodded once and stepped back gracefully. Camden immediately tried to surge upward, but Dr. Harrison placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, keeping him firmly in place. "I said remain where you are," the administrator repeated, his voice carrying a warning that even Camden recognized as non-negotiable. "We're going to have a detailed conversation about what just transpired here, and you're going to want to choose your words very carefully." He turned to address the crowd of students still gathered around them, their phones still recording every word and gesture. "Everyone put your devices away immediately," he commanded, and there was instant compliance. Years of serving as Dean of Students had given him an unmistakable aura of authority that brooked no argument. "This isn't entertainment for your social media accounts. This is a serious situation that requires immediate adult intervention." He turned to Zoe, recognizing her as the Academy's unofficial documentarian. "Ms. Kim, I know you've been recording. I need you to preserve that video and bring your phone to my office immediately after lunch period ends. Don't post anything online until we've had a chance to review what actually happened here." Zoe nodded quickly, understanding the gravity in his tone. Dr. Harrison wasn't just the dean of students, he was also the unofficial mediator for serious disciplinary issues. When he became personally involved, real consequences inevitably followed. "Now," he continued, finally allowing Camden to stand upright. "Mr. Pierce, you want to explain to me why you thought it was appropriate to approach a student who was eating alone and escalate the situation to physical contact." Camden straightened his jacket with shaking hands, his face still flushed with humiliation. "She attacked me," he said, his voice higher than usual. "Everyone witnessed it. She assaulted me for absolutely no reason." "For no reason?" Dr. Harrison's eyebrows rose skeptically. "So you're telling me Ms. Martinez just decided to randomly attack you while you were minding your own business?" "I was trying to be friendly and welcoming," Camden insisted, his voice becoming more desperate. "I was helping her understand how things work here, and she completely lost control." Several students made derisive sounds, having witnessed the entire exchange from beginning to end. Dr. Harrison raised a hand for silence, his attention shifting to Isabella with professional interest. "Ms. Martinez, I'd like to hear your version of these events." Isabella's response was measured and precise, delivered with the clinical accuracy of a military report. "Mr. Pierce approached my table uninvited and began questioning my choice to eat alone. When I attempted to disengage from the conversation, he became increasingly aggressive in his behavior. He deliberately knocked my lunch to the floor, then reached out to put his hands on me. I defended myself using minimal necessary force to neutralize the threat." The clinical precision of her description contrasted sharply with Camden's emotional outburst, and Dr. Harrison clearly recognized the difference in their accounts. "Minimal necessary force," he repeated with interest. "That was quite an effective restraint technique you employed. Where exactly did you learn it?" "My father served 15 years in special operations," Isabella replied without hesitation. "He taught me that the most effective defense is to end a confrontation as quickly as possible without causing unnecessary harm to either party." The revelation sent murmurs through the watching students. Suddenly, Isabella's unusual composure and precision made perfect sense, providing context for her seemingly supernatural calm under pressure. Dr. Harrison's expression shifted to one of understanding and surprisingly approval. "And your father would be?" "Colonel Rafael Martinez, recently retired from Fort Carson," Isabella said with quiet pride. Dr. Harrison actually smiled at this information, his entire demeanor warming noticeably. "I know Colonel Martinez by reputation. Outstanding officer, served with genuine distinction." He turned back to Camden, and his expression hardened again. "Which makes your decision to physically intimidate his daughter particularly poor judgment on your part." Camden's face paled as the implications began to sink in. Attacking the daughter of a decorated special operations colonel wasn't just socially problematic, it was potentially dangerous on multiple levels that he was only beginning to comprehend. "I want to review the security footage," Dr. Harrison announced to the room. "All of it, from the moment Mr. Pierce approached Ms. Martinez's table until now." "The cameras have been malfunctioning," Oliver interjected quickly, his voice tight with barely concealed panic. "They've been flickering all week." Dr. Harrison fixed him with a stare that could freeze molten lava. "Mr. Chen, are you telling me you've been monitoring our security equipment and somehow have knowledge of technical difficulties that haven't been reported through proper channels?" Oliver's face went completely white as he realized his critical mistake. Marcus grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back, but the damage was already done and couldn't be undone. Dr. Harrison pulled out his radio and spoke into it with calm, professional authority. "Security to the dining hall immediately. We need to review footage from cameras 12 and 15, covering the last 45 minutes. Also, please check maintenance records for any reported malfunctions in this area." Within minutes, 2 security officers arrived with tablets displaying the requested footage. What they found changed everything about the situation. The main camera had indeed been experiencing intermittent technical difficulties, but the backup system had captured everything in crystal clear detail. More importantly, the security team had been maintaining detailed logs of the camera malfunctions, and the pattern they revealed was absolutely damning. "Sir," the lead security officer spoke quietly to Dr. Harrison while showing him the tablet screen, "these malfunctions have been happening systematically for the past 8 weeks, always during lunch periods, always affecting cameras in areas where we've subsequently received reports of bullying incidents." Dr. Harrison studied the screen, his expression growing darker with each passing second. "And you believe this is coordinated rather than coincidental? The timing is too precise to be random chance. Someone with access to our system has been deliberately creating surveillance blind spots." The officer glanced toward Camden and his friends. "We also discovered this in the deleted messages folder of one of our monitored group chats." He showed Dr. Harrison a screenshot that made the administrator's jaw clench visibly. "Phoenix Initiative. Day 1 begins now." The timestamp matched exactly with when Camden had begun his approach toward Isabella's table. The evidence was overwhelming and completely undeniable. This wasn't a spontaneous incident or a simple case of teenage social conflict. It was a carefully planned campaign of harassment with sophisticated technical sabotage designed to avoid detection and accountability. Dr. Harrison handed the tablet back to security and turned to address the crowd of students still gathered around them. "Everyone except the principal participants needs to clear this area immediately. This is no longer a simple disciplinary matter. This is now a criminal investigation." The words sent shockwaves through the watching students. Criminal investigation meant police involvement, permanent records, potential felony charges. The casual cruelty of elite private school bullying had suddenly transformed into something with serious adult consequences. As students reluctantly dispersed, Dr. Harrison focused his full attention on Camden with laser-like intensity. "Mr. Pierce, you're suspended from all team activities and student government positions pending a complete investigation. You'll also be escorted to my office, where we'll be contacting your parents and local law enforcement." "Law enforcement?" Camden's voice cracked with disbelief. "You can't be serious." "This is just typical teenage drama. Conspiracy to commit harassment, deliberate sabotage of school security systems, and assault are not teenage drama," Dr. Harrison replied coldly. "They're felony charges that will follow you for the rest of your life." The legal terminology hit like sledgehammer blows. Camden looked frantically toward his friends, but Oliver and Marcus were backing away, clearly wanting no association with whatever consequences were about to unfold. "My father will never allow this to stand," Camden said desperately. "He'll have your job. He'll have all your jobs." Dr. Harrison's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Your father will be very interested to learn that his son has been using his position to systematically terrorize other students while covering up the evidence through technical manipulation. District attorneys tend to be particularly sensitive about corruption scandals, especially when they involve their own families." The threat rang completely hollow now, and everyone present could hear the desperation beneath the bravado. The carefully constructed power structure that had protected Camden was crumbling in real time, and his panic was becoming increasingly visible to everyone watching. Isabella, who had been quietly observing the proceedings with professional detachment, finally spoke up. "Dr. Harrison, I appreciate your intervention, But I want to be absolutely clear about something. I don't want this situation to be about my father's military service or about receiving special treatment because of his reputation and accomplishments. What happened here should matter regardless of who my family is. Her words carried a moral authority that silenced the entire room. Dr. Harrison nodded with visible respect and admiration. "You're absolutely right, Ms. Martinez. This matters because every student has the fundamental right to eat lunch without being harassed, intimidated, or physically assaulted. Your father's service is honorable and should be respected, but it's not the reason you deserve protection today." As security officers escorted Camden toward the administrative offices, his parting words echoed across the dining hall with venomous intensity. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you've started here." The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke after an explosion, but Isabella's response was calm and crystal clear. "Actually, I think I finished something that should have ended a very long time ago." Later that afternoon, despite Dr. Harrison's explicit request to wait, Zoe's video began its viral journey across social media platforms. She uploaded it with a simple but powerful caption: "New student stops academy bully in 3 seconds. Sometimes quiet strength defeats loud power." The response was immediate and overwhelming beyond anyone's expectations. Students from other schools began sharing their own stories of systematic bullying. Parents expressed shock and outrage at the sophisticated nature of the harassment network. Local news outlets picked up the story, particularly interested in the security camera sabotage and the district attorney's son's central involvement. By evening, Westfield Strong was trending across multiple social media platforms. But more importantly, 5 other students came forward with their own detailed stories of being targeted by Camden and his carefully organized network. Each incident followed the exact same pattern: isolation, escalation, and mysterious camera malfunctions during the most serious moments. The investigation that followed revealed a sophisticated system of intimidation that went far beyond typical teenage bullying. Text message coordination, social media manipulation, and even some level of administrative corruption designed to protect the perpetrators while systematically silencing their victims. When District Attorney Pierce arrived at the academy for an emergency meeting with administrators, his political instincts were already calculating comprehensive damage control strategies. But the evidence was too extensive, too well documented, and too publicly visible to simply make disappear through legal maneuvering. 3 days later, Isabella sat in the same dining hall corner, reading the same military psychology textbook, but now she wasn't alone anymore. Zoe sat across from her, along with 2 of Camden's former victims who finally felt safe enough to eat lunch without constant fear and hypervigilance. Their conversation was interrupted when a senior student approached their table with obvious nervousness. Alexander Rivera, captain of the debate team and one of Camden's closest friends before the incident, stood uncertainly nearby. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his tone careful and respectful, completely different from his usual confident demeanor. Isabella gestured to an empty chair, curious about his intentions and what he might want to discuss. "I wanted to apologize," Alexander began without preamble. "Not just for what Camden did, but for all of us who knew it was happening and didn't stop it. We told ourselves it wasn't that serious, that it was just normal academy social dynamics." He looked directly at Isabella with genuine remorse. But watching that video, seeing how terrified those other students were to come forward, we realized the truth. We all knew what was happening, and we allowed it to continue because confronting it was more difficult than ignoring it. His honesty hung in the air, raw and uncomfortable, but undeniably genuine. Isabella studied his face carefully before responding with measured consideration. "The question isn't what you did before," she said quietly. It's what you choose to do moving forward from this point. Alexander nodded, clearly understanding the challenge implicit in her words. The debate team voted unanimously yesterday. We're implementing a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind. Anyone who targets another student gets immediately removed from the team. No exceptions or second chances. That's a positive start, Zoe said approvingly. But what about the other organizations? The other social groups? We're working on it systematically, Alexander admitted. Real change takes time and sustained effort. But what you did, what you demonstrated, it showed everyone that the old way of doing things doesn't have to continue indefinitely. As he left, Isabella returned to her textbook, but her mind was processing the larger implications of recent events. The system that had protected bullies had been exposed and dismantled, but systems had a way of rebuilding themselves unless people remained constantly vigilant against their return. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think this is over? Camden has friends in college, friends with very long memories. Watch your back, military princess. She showed the message to Zoe, who immediately took screenshots for evidence and documentation. Should we report this immediately? Zoe asked with concern. Isabella considered the question carefully, then smiled with the same calm confidence she had shown during the dining hall confrontation. Let them come, she said simply. I learned a long time ago that bullies are only truly dangerous when their intended targets are unprepared and isolated. She closed the textbook and looked around the dining hall, noting how fundamentally different the atmosphere felt now. Students made genuine eye contact across social boundaries. Conversations happened between groups that had never interacted before. The pervasive fear that had once dominated the space had lifted, replaced by something more honest and authentically human. Besides, she added with quiet conviction, I'm not alone anymore. As Isabella walked toward the exit, her textbook tucked securely under her arm, the dining hall continued its normal rhythm around her. But there was something different in the air now, something electric and hopeful that suggested this story, while complete, was really just the beginning of a much larger and more significant transformation. The security cameras worked perfectly now, their steady green lights serving as a constant reminder that darkness could only thrive when no one was watching. And at Westfield Academy, someone was always watching now, ready to bear witness and demand accountability. The change manifested itself in small but significant ways throughout the following weeks. Tables that had once been rigidly segregated by social hierarchy now hosted mixed conversations across traditional boundaries. Students who had previously eaten alone by necessity rather than choice found themselves approached by others, extending genuine invitations to join their groups. Near the windows, Sarah Chen sat with the drama club for the first time in months. Before the incident, Camden's network had made her life miserable after she had refused his advances, forcing her to eat lunch in the library to avoid confrontation and potential escalation. Now, with the protection of witnesses and functioning security cameras, she felt safe enough to reclaim her rightful place in the school's social spaces. At another table, Miguel Santos showed his bruised wrist to concerned classmates, finally comfortable enough to reveal the evidence of Camden's friendly shoulder punches and deliberate arm twisting. For weeks he had hidden the physical evidence, terrified that reporting it would only make the situation exponentially worse. The viral video had given him courage to finally speak up, and the investigation that followed had validated every detail of his traumatic experiences. Dr. Harrison moved through the dining hall with renewed purpose, his presence no longer just supervisory, but actively protective. The revelation of the systematic harassment network had transformed his role from administrator to guardian, and he embraced the responsibility with serious dedication. His radio crackled occasionally with updates from other parts of the academy, part of a comprehensive new communication system designed to ensure no area went unmonitored or unprotected. But the most significant change was less visible and more profound. There was an electricity in the conversations, an energy that emerged when people realized they possessed the power to actively shape their environment rather than simply endure whatever was imposed upon them. Students spoke more freely, laughed more genuinely, and moved through the space without the constant threat assessment calculations that had become tragically second nature. Isabella paused at the dining hall entrance, observing this transformation with quiet satisfaction. Her father's lessons about strategic thinking had included the concept of force multipliers, how one decisive action could create cascading effects far beyond its initial scope and impact. She was witnessing that principle operating in real time throughout the academy. Mrs. Patterson, the school counselor, approached with a warm, genuine smile. "Isabella, I wanted to let you know we've had 23 students request counseling sessions this week. Many of them specifically mentioned your example as giving them the courage to speak up about their own situations and experiences." The number was staggering. 23 students who had been suffering in complete silence, now finding their voices because one person had demonstrated that effective resistance was not only possible, but could be successful. "I'm also pleased to tell you that the Martial Arts Club wants to extend you a formal invitation," Mrs. Patterson continued enthusiastically. "They're particularly interested in your defensive techniques and believe you could help teach others valuable skills." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. The idea of sharing her father's hard-earned lessons with others appealed to her tremendously, especially if it meant fewer students would face similar situations completely unprepared and vulnerable. As she walked toward her next class, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat, but a message from a number she recognized. One of the seniors who had always seemed completely untouchable in the academy's rigid social hierarchy. "Heard what you accomplished. Some of us have been waiting years for someone to finally stand up to that crowd effectively. If you need backup or support, you've got it unconditionally." The message represented something unprecedented in her experience. Older students offering protection to a younger one, not out of social obligation or peer pressure, but from genuine respect for her actions and their consequences. But even as positive responses continued pouring in, Isabella remained alert to undercurrents of resentment and potential retaliation. Camden's suspension had created a significant power vacuum, and not everyone was pleased with the new social dynamics emerging in its wake. She noticed certain students avoiding eye contact, clustering in corners with hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when she passed nearby. Her father's comprehensive training had taught her that victory often brought entirely new categories of challenges. Success made you visible and recognizable, and visibility inevitably brought both genuine allies and determined enemies. As she rounded the corner toward her advanced chemistry class, she spotted a group of unfamiliar faces near the main entrance. Older teenagers who clearly didn't belong to Westfield Academy. College students, seniors from other schools in the district. The network that had supported Camden's systematic behavior extended far beyond these walls, and they were definitely taking notice of recent developments. One of them caught her eye and smiled, but there was nothing friendly or welcoming in the expression. It was the smile of someone who interpreted her recent success as a direct challenge to be met and defeated, rather than a victory to be celebrated or respected. Isabella met his gaze steadily, her own expression remaining calm and untroubled. She had learned long ago that showing fear only encouraged predators and made them more aggressive. Instead, she mentally catalogued important details: faces, postures, the way they positioned themselves near exits, information that might prove critically useful later. The confrontation in the dining hall had been just the opening move in a much larger and more complex game, and she was beginning to understand the true scope of what she had challenged by refusing to accept her designated place in their carefully constructed hierarchy. The system that had protected bullies like Camden possessed roots that extended throughout the entire community, connections and relationships that wouldn't be severed easily or without significant resistance. But as she entered her classroom and took her usual seat, Isabella felt no regret about the path she had chosen to walk. Behind her, the hallways buzzed with the voices of students who no longer whispered in constant fear. The security cameras maintained their vigilant watch over every corner, and somewhere in the building, 23 young people were preparing to tell their stories honestly for the first time in their lives. The war for the soul of Westfield Academy was far from over, but the first crucial battle had been decisively won through courage, preparation, and unwavering moral conviction. And as Isabella opened her textbook and prepared for class, she couldn't help but smile at the thought of whatever challenges might come next. After all, she was just getting started with transforming this place.